What's up, everybody? Konnichiwa from Japan. Welcome to Omnic Lab 136. We're actually going to skip across the pond to go to Busan today, talking about map mastery with our special guest, ChipSa, all the way in Europe. We're bridging the gap in 3 countries this week. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. And joining us as per usual, we have the Georgia one-hit wonder. Andres, what's up, dude?
What's up? What's up? Yeah, we're technically covering like the whole world right here with time zones. We're like each tri-center of the world. It's pretty cool though, and it's good to
Yeah.
have you back, ChipSa. For
Yeah.
those of you who haven't heard about the guy before, we had him on the show for a Doomfist episode. He's a legendary Doomfist in the EU region. I know he's feared among his latter teammates.
It's true.
Yep. So this week we're going to be talking all about Busan or Busan, depending on how you pronounce it, and we're going to just burn through a couple announcements, kind of reintroduce you to ChipSa, and kind of a little bit of his background and what he's doing now, and then we're going to go into what do you do when you're trying to play control map in general, just kind of like trying to pick the mind of like a top 500 player in general of like what they do when they think about control maps in general, and then we'll kind of go into each individual subsection of the map and talk about those. So without further ado, let's get through some announcements because those are the messy things. We have game night this week, actually starting today after the show. We're going to basically have a full work day for those of you in the United States, and at the end of the day, around I'd say probably safe zone is 6:30ish Eastern Standard Time as of the recording of this episode is kind of the generic start time. And then when people start filtering in and showing up and we get teams going, it starts a death match and then 6-on-6, and then it just doesn't stop until people go to bed. So even if the EU people come on and they show up and they get enough people, then they can start things in EU, and then we end up moving over to NA inevitably as the EU folks need to go crash. But that's kind of how it works. We encourage everyone to come and hang out. We had a good turnout last time, so please come out. And this is on the 25th. So do not come on the 1st of February. It will not be there. However, I've been talking a little bit with some people, and maybe the community might just run another one if they're around, if they want to. We might just leave it up another week if you guys want to run another game night. Andres has some more info with regards to our sponsor. If he has
Absolutely.
it up.
Yeah, I do.
Sorry to pull a fast one on you, Andres.
No. I was just having some technical difficulties over here, but we're back.
Okay.
We're back. Thanks a lot to Top Score Solutions for being a longtime sponsor. They're an esports community oriented. They're here for business education, analytics. They want to help develop a business or a service or organization. They're a group of people that are basically get together. It's a huge supporting community. We've met lawyers, we've met guys from marketing, we've met streamers. They all converge in this community. If you want to start your own venture into esports, it's a great place to kind of like link up with other people. They have a Discord. You can also visit them at topscoresolutions.com. Check them out. We recently had a podcast with them where we told the story of Omnic Lab and how it came into being. So check that out if you guys are interested. It turned out pretty cool. Also, check out Omnic Meta, or partner website, all about stats. If you guys want to see your profiles, how you're performing in the game, how you can improve, maybe where your shortcomings are, Switch from the Omnic Meta always has some pretty good insight. He's always releasing some cool articles when the meta changes. It's a great place if you want to get a little more technical with your knowledge about Overwatch. And also check out our Humble Bundle monthly affiliate. The link will be posted in the show notes. It can get you some cool games and help support the show in the meantime as well.
That's going to do it for all of our announcements. We have another little teaser as for what we're going to be doing next week, but I'll leave that to the end of the show. Let's get into talking about Busan in Korea. So ChipSa, before we talk about map, we should talk about you. So tell us a little bit about kind of your past gaming, just kind of a quick synopsis. If they want to get the full details, they'll obviously go back to the Doomfist episode where we first had you on, so you don't have to repeat yourself too much.
Yeah,
And
but
then
what
talk
have you
about
been,
kind
what
of
have
what
you
you've
been
been
up
up
to
to
lately?
lately. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I basically only played Overwatch is the first game I played seriously. I played Genshin. I played on like a tier 2 team in EU before, like 2016-ish. I stopped playing around the end of 2016. When Doomfist came out, I was like, why not just try this here? He looks fun. I just grinded him a lot. ended up being really good at the hero. Thought, why not just stream it, see what happens? Stream kind of grew from there. And then I basically just a full-time streamer now. I've been streaming for just under 2 years now, I believe it is. So yeah, just been
Very
full-time
cool.
streaming.
And
How's the-
any quick things on the Doomfist grind as of late, or are you kind of mixing things up currently?
Yeah, I was
I
about to
mean-
ask. Doomfist just went through some changes. Has that changed what you do a little bit?
I mean, yeah, I mean the nerfs are pretty damn significant. But the way you play, especially in like a goats heavy meta, doesn't really change the way you play. It just makes it a bit more annoying to play as, but it doesn't really change the fundamental play style. So I've still been playing the hero. I'm just playing the hero to see what he's like since the nerf, basically, and he still seems fine in solo queue. Not much has changed, even though the nerfs were pretty significant. You just got to change the way you play.
Sure.
That's good to
Sure,
hear
sure.
that
And-
the Doomfist main hasn't died.
No, not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Not until they completely delete the character, right? We've got also this is a quick thing with regards to nerfs and stuff. Today, the whole Chinese New Year lunar calendar celebration for Year of the Pig is now live. There's a bunch of new skins, both Korea culture themed and Year of the Pig themed, with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms generals. There's 5 generals in that. They're all pretty cool stuff, actually. And there's other mix-in stuff there, but just keep in mind there's buffs and nerfs also went live with that same patch for Brigitte, Diva Defense Matrix, as well as Armor. So those are the
And
3 big
Reaper.
ones. And Reaper's got his lifesteal adjustment. All right, so let's talk about control next, right? So tell us what your thought process is when you kind of approach going into a control map in solo queue versus in 6-stack, and then especially with regards to picking heroes and kind of like what your general approach is for kind of like how you want to win and play with your team in those environments a little bit differently than the other map types.
Okay, so control generally, the heroes you pick is very varied on the stage. You know, like maps like Ilios, you know, you're playing Widow and Ruins, and then you're playing like a full Rissa Hog comp on, well, you know. But generally, I'd say most of the time, like 75% of the time, you want to be running heavy mobility comps, because what is very important in control is how fast you can get back to the point, how fast you can stall the point. Because having control of the point is way, way, way more important than it is in any other game mode, because you're constantly gaining it. Like if you have the point, you can stall the fight for like 30 seconds. As long as you have the point, it's totally fine. Even if you lose the fight, you commit ult, it's fine because you're constantly generating percentage. So this is why having high mobility heroes like Lucio, like Winston, you know, heroes like this is generally very important. The only time you want to stray away from high mobility heroes is on very specific stages where you're playing around a set objective, like on Well. You know, you're looking at your primary objective to just get kills by sucking people into the well or hooking people into the well, you know, booping people into the well. But like I said, generally you want to be playing durable, either way running high, fast dive mobility comps, or you're going to be running like a goats comp, and you just want to be playing on point the whole time and playing not to die. As long as you have point control, you don't need to play to win the fight. You just need to play to not die, and also you can then take the percentage up and then use your ults at the very end of when you're going to win. So it's generally more about controlling the objective and having point control. It's very important that you don't let the opponents flip the point unless they commit a lot of ults or, you know, or something like that. You know, it has to be very important that you force something out of them if they're going to flip the point.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, because when you think about the other maps, like sometimes payload, you're not as afraid of letting the team maybe gain some ground or move the payload a little bit, because at the end of the day, as long as they're not at the checkpoint, you know, they haven't won anything. But with control, every second that you don't have the point is a second that the enemy team is getting closer to the win and you're getting further away from the win. So yeah, like you said, it's a different way of thinking about the objective in control.
I think a lot of it is based on in like high level play. You want to think, how many fights am I going to get out? So, you know, Kings are a second point. You know, if you really squeeze the fights early, you can get 3 fights out of second point. But if you misplay it bad, you only get 1 fight out of second point. And then they just push the full payload. And this is like a really important concept of like, we can give them set ground as long as it still means we have 2 fights until they can push the point, you know?
Right.
And whereas in control, it's more so about like the percentage. I mean, yes, there is like a certain degree of like, if you have 80% on the point, so they have 1 fight, you know, this is the last fight, you can use everything. but it's a lot more based on if you can stall really, really good, it's much more important to do that than it is to stall on payload. Like, for instance, if you're playing a King of the Hill map and you have Winston Primal Rage, it's honestly not even a bad play necessarily to just use Primal Rage and just build an extra 10%, as long as it means that you're on a threshold of it's a one fight territory. You need one fight and you win the map as opposed to two.
Right, and
Even just swapping heroes with like an ultimate economy that you're trying to maintain, where you're sacrificing some of your old economy for percentage in that moment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's worthwhile. Sometimes, again, it's about the margins of, if I use my Primal Rage here, if I use my Diva Bomb here to stall, is it worth using 2 ults in a fight that you're always going to lose, but you're going to gain a certain amount of percentage so that it puts you further towards winning the actual point? And that's more prevalent in King of the Hill than it is on any of the map.
Right, it's kind of like the only map mode where sometimes staggering yourself, as long as it guarantees you holding the point for a little longer, even knowing that you're not going to win that fight, you're probably going to give him a little bit of full charge. If you're still having control of the point, it'll still be worth it. While in some of the other game modes, doing the same thing is almost just, it's straight up throwing.
Yeah. Like, if you're Primal Raging on point and payload, you're like, what are you doing? You're buying 5 extra seconds of effectively no value and feeding ult and wasting it all, Whereas in King of the Hill, it's very, very strong in specific situations.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about control.
So I wanted to kind of like, before we move on again, kind of stay parked here a little bit and see if there's anything that you can kind of provide for advice to kind of bring us from high tier down to, like, I would say anything you would give it as an advice point for like top 500 play would kind of trickle down pretty well until you get to about high plat or low diamond. I'd say that's where things start to funnel down into a completely different setup of how players are playing control as a whole. So what are some types of things that maybe you would give it advice in these scenarios where teams aren't really as concerned with picking what's optimal or picking things that are good on the map? What would that approach be in that situation?
I mean, I think that King of the Hill, it depends on the stage, but like I said, a lot of stages is very important to pick the right heroes. But if you're not going to do that, you need to play for a win condition. Like, you can play, like, it's really important that your team has a win condition. So you can play like heavy tank comps on maps that aren't good for tanks, as long as you play it as your win condition. You play Ilios and you play like quad tank and Ilios ruins. As long as you play together it's about identifying what's going to win you the round. You're not going to win the round with a tank comp by running at the enemy team and try and chase them down. No, you win by staying on point, forcing them to come to you, and then you kill them. So oftentimes it comes, if you have like a Reaper one trick on your team and you're like a flexible player, you want to be playing around the Reaper and realizing that the win condition is by grouping up with him, as opposed to playing the actual meta,
Right.
Yeah. And usually, though, my advice to the lower ranks is don't try to be so indie sometimes. Like, people who are at the higher ranks because they've learned to abuse certain heroes in certain maps, to abuse certain strategies, and they have realized, like, hey, this works a lot better in this map. So, you don't have to fight the flow of the river. Just go with it sometimes. Learn a little bit and imitate the higher ranks. Because you might say, like, oh, but this doesn't work at a gold elo. And some people might say, well, that's why you're stuck at gold elo, because you're not trying the stuff that it abuses the stuff to make you pull up forward.
A lot of it is also the point that, like, the meta in lower elos isn't really defined. Like, you can play anything anywhere, and it's still going to get decent. Like, you're still going to get like 80% of the value you normally would. Whereas if you're playing like, you're playing Widow on Control Center on Legion Tower, you're going to get almost no value against any level of competent team because there's no sidelines, But at lower elo, you can kind of a lot. If you want to climb, I think generally you want to be like selecting between 1 or 2 heroes in different roles and just like playing them almost regardless of the situation. Even though that's not the optimal way to play, and that you're not going to necessarily improve as a player, that's the best way to gain rank, at least in the short term.
Right. Yeah, you can get away with
playing
a
bunch of heroes is going to give you long-term benefit, but not
Absolutely.
so much in the short term.
It's the difference between do you play rank to improve as a player, or do you play rank to get a higher number on your scoreboard, like on your screen, And that's the difference.
Well said.
Yeah, you basically put succinctly in one sentence what we talked about for an hour last week. So yeah, that's a good way to put it. So let's talk about Busan. Let's not beat around the bush anymore. This is good advice in a short amount of time. So let's get going. You can choose any order you like, ChipSa, based off of
Okay.
what headspace you're kind of in the moment. But the map's labels are downtown, which is the outdoorsy map, lots of high verticality, the big gigantic train kill box. And then you have
Mhm.
the sanctuary, which is the big drum in the middle of a really beautiful garden in Korea. And then a mecha base, which is a completely enclosed area with partial cover that actually is on a timer going up and down on the point, and the point is significantly lower than the main approach routes to get there.
Mhm. Well, I'll start with downtown. I think generally, I think like Widowmaker is incredibly potent on that map. I think that the high ground you can get on that map is absolutely crazy. Um, so I think Widowmaker is I wouldn't say a must, but it's pretty close to a must on that map. You know,
Hmm.
just any this is like a map that regardless of the meta, like high mobility heroes, vertical mobility heroes, specifically like Genji, like Widowmaker, like Winston, Hammond, Diva, are going to be always going to be incredibly strong. However, there is another way you can play the map. Is you just go around the outside and you just play it again a tank comp and you just death ball on point. It's hard for the Widow to actually get angles, and that works as long as you have control of the point. The second you're retaking with that kind of situation, it's generally pretty difficult to do because if you run that way and the enemy team expects it, it's relatively easy to just get one or two boop kills or just like random cheese kills because it's such a tight corridor. Always pushing into tight corridors is always very, very dangerous. So
Mm.
the ideal comp I'd run is probably something like Winston Diva, Ana Lucio, Genji Widow, something like that. And again, once you have control of the point, it's about getting your Widow set up high ground and denying the enemy Widow their high ground. So your Widow's always going to have an advantage in the duel.
Yeah, this map seems like it really favors range, right? You have like huge vantage points that overlook almost the entirety of the map. You can even see the point pretty well from there. Like you said, it's easy to hide behind the bridge and stuff, but for the most part, heroes that have a lot of range are gonna be able to abuse heroes that are very static, like
Yeah.
Reinhardt or Roadhog that have to
Mm.
just walk
Yeah.
around in the middle of the map. But like you said, mobility heroes are awesome because they actually give you the chance of contesting this big vantage points. Like if the Widow is set up there, you can use your Winston, you can use your Diva to actually get up there and contest her rather than struggle against that range. It does seem like is the one map that really favors range in Busan. What do you think?
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. I think playing against a good Widow and a well-coordinated team on that map, once you're behind, it's almost impossible to push into, and unless their Widow misses like 5 shots in a row. Like because the chokes are so tight and the distance between your Widow and the choke points is so big, like it's almost impossible to get a good dive off if you're holding the actual choke with your front line. So like
Right.
as long as you're doing that, it's like I said, it's very, very difficult to push into.
So let's talk about a couple other heroes. Like we do have what we've kind of listed as our A list, right? There are some scenarios where you might find yourself in a situation where there's not a Widow player on your team.
Mm-hmm.
And in those situations, I think that um, at least what Andres and I have been experienced with running on this particular map point, we've tried Ash because Ash can actually get up there.
Mm-hmm.
We've also tried a kind of like a May Goats to kind of utilize the wall to help mitigate a lot of the Widow damage and Widow pressure if you don't have that. And then that would also kind of play into what you said, where it's really, really difficult to play when you have to retake, but it's also really, really strong if you can get there first and set
Yeah,
up.
I think
Very similar to
that
kind of a Bastion, I would say, right?
yeah, I think like the problem with I mean again, if you don't have a Widow player, if you play Ash, you're kind of just playing a worse Widow, especially on that map. Again, a good Widow on that map will beat the Ash like 60-70% of the time. So I think what I would do if I didn't have a Widow player, assuming we could play it, we just play a heavy tank comp. You run straight to point to left side, and you just play under, and you just play together. Second, any of their tanks drop, specifically like the Winston. If you can kill a Winston, they effectively have almost no kill pressure on you. The Winston is what creates the havoc against tank comps. Is like assuming he's played well. So the second you
Right.
get a kill, like 1 or 2 kills, it's almost impossible for any team to do anything, and you just kind of sit there and let the Widow be up there, and she can't do much. The only problem with that again is that once they get control, it's very difficult to retake. I mean, often what happens in most Widow dominant maps, it's the way you push the point is by your Widow snipes their Widow, and then you win off that. But if you can't do that, I always think that playing heavy death wall comps against widow comps is the second best way to play against it, besides just running a mirror comp.
That doesn't always necessarily mean triple tank, quad tank, right? It
No,
could just mean
yeah.
2-2-2, which is like a death ball synergistic style.
It's
like
just
Reaper
important
and
that
McCree,
you,
right?
yeah, you play. I basically always play a diva so that you have some level of pressure. Like the diva
Right.
can then fly in the widow if you're team fighting. Because like what you can do is you can have your five other members push in as your diva flies on the widow, and then the widow has no chance of actually getting any value in the short term. But yeah, you don't have to play goats, you don't have to play quad tank, but it's just important you realize that the win condition of your comp is playing as a group.
And
Right.
would you say that? Sorry, Andres, I'll
No, go
go
ahead.
first if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask about the X factor in this situation, which is Farah, and why that she's really not as big of a consideration because of how big the threat Widowmaker is. If Widowmaker is present, it's not that Farah is necessarily bad because you have lots of verticality for her. The problem is that it's exposed verticality. There's nothing for her to kind of utilize to move around to not be just out in the middle of open and get a free shot from. Even Ana can kill you fairly easily on this map, and I've done it multiple times for people trying to run Farah.
I mean, the thing with Farah, again, is that Farah is very good at maps that have a really high skybox, which I believe downtown Busan has a very high skybox.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there's almost nowhere to hide in the sky. So, for instance, you can play Farah on Garden Stage on Lijiang Tower because you can hide behind the big tower, the big pillar in the middle, and you just like sneak around. You can avoid the widow as much as you can, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same as like Ruins. There's almost no places to hide from a Widowmaker. So a well-played Widowmaker will just kill you every time, basically.
Right.
So in theory, if Widowmaker didn't exist, she'd be very, very strong on that map because you can sit up in the skybox. It means Diva can't really do anything against you. McCree can't do anything against you. And you have a lot of spam. The chokes are very tight, so the spam is very potent. But purely because of Widowmaker existing, it limits. Again, Widowmaker existing on a map like that limits like 50 to 60% of the DPS heroes you can play because she's just so incredibly strong against most of those heroes.
Yeah, and going back to the concept of range and why Widowmaker is so oppressive in this map, the sightlines that you get in this map are huge, meaning that most heroes are gonna fall or gonna run into fall of damage trying to shoot at a Widowmaker that is, set up really far away, or any hero that is set up in like those huge sightlines. But a Widowmaker is technically the only hero that doesn't run into that problem and can still get one-shot kills basically at any range. Making her ideal to kind of like take that position. And like you said, if you don't have a Widowmaker in the map, if nobody's abusing that style of range, then yeah, a Pharah could thrive because again, Pharah is a hero that can take advantage of that huge range. She can set up again in that vantage point and shoot everyone, do the same amount of damage than if she was, 5 centimeters away from the other hero. But yeah, you just have to think about the map in that is the strongest thing that you can abuse in the map, that huge range and that huge vantage point. And Widow is the best hero to do it.
I mean, that's always the problem with Farah in general, is that in theory she's very good, but she's just too easily countered. If you play Farah into a comp that's the Farah is good into, she's incredibly strong. Like she's broken, basically. She's ridiculous. But once you play like a Diva, once you play like a McCree or like a Widowmaker, her effectiveness just goes down so much because you have to play so scared almost the whole game that you don't get the same value as you would before.
Now, if you're in the lower ranks and the enemy team is playing not a good Widowmaker or a good McCree, they can't take you down. Like Pharmacy can totally wreck in this map.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's honestly why people complain so much about Pharahs at pretty much any rank up until even in low diamond. People complain about Pharahs not being dealt with because A, you're either playing a comp that has a lot of players in it that aren't, good enough on their hit scan abilities yet to reasonably pressure them, paired with a Diva player that's competent enough to recognize how to deal with the threat. And then like the lower you go, the less consistent people are able to hit shots on vertical heroes in particular. The more verticality a hero has, the harder it is for them to hit than just by nature, right, in the three-dimensional space. So those players are going to have less confidence. They're also going to have less mechanical ability. And so the heroes that are oppressive when those things aren't present become more oppressive, if that makes sense. The lucky thing for you guys out there in these lower ranks is you have to understand that the Pharaohs equally have the same level of competence, generically speaking, that you do, meaning that they're going to be missing less shots as well. So you have to keep that in mind when you're playing at these ranks, and realize that all factors should, in all intents and purposes, be equal.
But
I think,
again,
yeah, go ahead.
go on. No, go on.
Oh, I was just about to transition. So if you got something else to say, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just saying. Basically, the thing with Pharah is that you don't have to be that precise to get value. Again, you can just hit big tanks, and as long as you're not getting pressured, you're never gonna die. And then it comes to the point where once you get barrage, a good barrage is just an instant team fight win. You know, against the comp, specifically if the comp doesn't have diva, a well played barrage isn't that hard to do. Especially against like tanky comps, it's just incredibly free. Whereas if you're playing Widow and you're missing your shots, you're useless. You know, there's no utility, there's no like failsafe mechanics that you have in that kit. It's just
Right.
It's just aim.
Your ultimate gains no value if you're not hitting your shots either. Unlike most of the other heroes, most of the other heroes, you can get some value out of their ult regardless. But Widow, if you don't hit your shots, your kit is gone.
Yeah.
All right, Chip. So which one would you like to dive into next? We got Sanctuary and Mecha Base.
Let's do Sanctuary next. So,
all right,
this map, one of my least favorite maps in the game. I think that this map is very weird, and I think it's one of the most diverse maps. I think heroes like mid-range heroes like McCree, Ashe, even Widow are incredibly strong in this map. But what this point is very weird is that the actual physical capture point is very hard to stay on because there's a massive drum in the way.
Yeah.
So this comes down to like the amount of times I've had games where just the point randomly flips is like really ridiculous. But it's one of those maps where if you play a heavy tank comps, like Reinhardt, Zarya, Diva, like a Goat's core comp, once you get control, you can just take the fight in front of the choke, like in front of the point, at the choke as opposed to like on the point. And then tank comps become incredibly strong. However, I think this is probably one of the best maps for Ashe I've ever seen. I think Bob is really, really good on this map because I think Bob is... The primary usage of Bob, I would say, is used for contesting point and for... It's like a win more ultimate. Like you have one pick, you pop Bob down as they're fighting. There's no way they have the resources to kill Bob. He's contesting the whole time. He's outputting damage the whole time. So this particular map is incredible for Ashe. I would play... If I had to pick a comp, I'd pick something like Ryan Zoya, Lucio Briggs, Zen Ashe, something like that, or like something based around like maybe like Ashe Hands or double sniper kind of thing, and you just play long range and you spam. Either that or you just run full goats, but you can do that. You can do that on pretty much any map and win.
Yeah, so, this one is a very like grounded map, right? There's no high ground basically that you can use effectively. There's, like you said, there's a lot of weird layouts inside of the map that makes it very brawly. So like characters like Reinhardt with a Lucio become pretty decent in this map with tiny quarters. There's not a lot of places where you can kite him off, especially if he's being speed boosted. Or Zarya, another hero that's pretty brawly. McCree, sometimes I can see him working in this kind of environment too.
May and Reaper can work really well, especially because there's so many weird flank routes that even if you do happen to get caught out with May and you have a cooldown available to you, you can generally kind of actually have a fighting chance to just separate people.
Yeah, this map really disincentivizes Widowmaker, for example. So heroes that, like you're saying, get a little bit shafted because of her presence kind of tend to thrive a little bit more, like Reaper, for example.
I think this map is very... It's like one of those maps where there's like a tiny bit of high ground on either side of the point, like here, and then once you jump down, there's like no way to get back up if you have no mobility.
You can't get back up without going around.
You play Zen Anna, you drop down, and there's any enemies there, you're just dead. Like you can't jump. It's just out of the jump height to get out. So like it's a very strange map in that like it can be very irritating to play against like certain heroes when they just sit up there. And like you're playing Ryan, you can't really kill them. You can pressure them, you can't really kill them. But the second that they drop down, they're just instantly dead,
Yeah.
Can you see this being like the more you learn it, the better off you might be just learning to play Doomfist on this map because of that feature? Like, you have the versatility of getting up there on those lower high grounds that you can't get back up on normal heroes, right?
I mean, the problem with Doomfist of this map is that there's not really that much room to pin. Like, the point itself is quite open. It's hard to get actual, like, rocket punches on people. So I generally don't play Doomfist as much on this map. I think specifically the mecha base stage is a lot better for him because like this stage, if you hold close, it's good. Because you just kind of force them, like you force the map to be different. You know, you hold the choke, they basically have one way to come. They go in front of you, then you can actually get value. But the first fight, it's very hard to get any value, and the only way you can is if you flank. And then flanking has its own positives and negatives. So I think this map's not that good for Doomfist. I think it's more of a mid-range map, like for McCree's, for Hanzo's, for Ashes, and like specifically again running like a heavy tank comp. It's quite snowbally in terms of once you get the point, as long as you're holding close, you're gonna be taking advantageous fights.
Yeah, another thing I was gonna say is the map itself is relatively open in the sense that it's easy to get to the point, right? There's no clear choke that your team can just hold and they can come in. Unlike Mecha Base, for example, that has some very defined chokes that you can hold. This one, it's a little bit more dynamic. So like the mobility, I think that Lucio is very important in this map in particular, helping your team get around. Because like I said, there's no clear choke that you can hold, so you gotta be ready to be able to like move from right or left to middle. It's very easy for the enemy team to come into the point, I feel.
I mean, that's the whole weakness of the tank comp, is that like you're kind of having to force some semblance of a choke. You know, you can play in that like up in that courtyard, and the guy would come there, but then they can just go like around to like the drum on the right or left side, and then they can touch point from there. I mean, you can play it like that, but the problem is it's just not like really strong. I mean, it's kind of held up on the fact that tanks are so good right now that you can basically play it anywhere.
Right.
But like, it's not. I don't think it's inherently strong for tanks. Just the way the meta is right now, there's almost no reason not to play them. You know.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I also wonder sometimes when I'm looking at these kind of maps, like 1 or 2 heroes prior, what these maps would have looked like. Because like imagining Busan Sanctuary around the time before we had heroes like Brigitte and Moira and Wrecking Ball, this map looks real different with some of the things you can consider an approach. And I've even tried running Sombra on this map, which she actually kind of fits that brawly motif, but it's really odd with the placement on the health packs. And like you said, ChipSa, you really have to force flanking a lot to get a lot of value out of it. And the EMP gets so easily obstructed with the point. You can't just like throw Translocator on point and EMP everyone because there's this giant freaking drum blocking a lot of your LOS. So
I mean, I think Sombra, I think Diva bombs in this map are really good. I've seen a lot of people get Diva bombs. You like throw them over the drum instead of hiding behind it, and then you can always get value with Sombra. Like Sombra Diva bomb is like a pretty high skill combo in order to get like significant value. I think Sombra nowadays, since the change to a health pack ult charge generation, like she's not that map dependent a hero. I think Sombra at the highest level is incredibly strong. I think she's genuinely borderline overpowered. And I think once the tank meta dies, she'll be played almost everywhere. So I don't know if this is specifically a good map for Sombra, but she'll probably get play anyway because I think she'll get a crap ton of play like on every stage.
I mean,
I find myself playing
always
Sombra.
Be a consideration, kind of like Tracer.
Yeah, definitely.
I find myself playing Sombra on this map in particular, actually. I don't know if it's because of the fact that it's so easy to sneak behind your enemy in this map in particular. Like I said, there's no chokes, so it's just very easy to get through spam and position yourself. And you can get back easily to the high ground. Like you said, it's not easy to get back on it for certain heroes, but Sombra has no problem with that, and she could get back to the health pack. So I have found myself playing Sombra in this map before.
Yeah. The only weakness is, like I said, like you said, there's like not really any high impact health packs on this map. There's one either side of point. It's like a mini close to the point, it's only a mini, so it's not that impactful. And then the mega is like pretty far to the left, and it's just too far out of the way. So, but I don't think hacking health packs is that important anymore in Sombra. It's more about
the EMP.
Hacking the enemy team, diving, and then getting EMP and just winning the fight because EMP is broken.
Yep. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for any other questions I had on this one. If you have any final thoughts before you move on to Mecha Base, you can have them now, or you can go straight into it.
I just go straight into Mecha Base. So
okay.
This map is probably one of my favorite maps in the game. I think it's really well designed.
It's a cool map.
It's probably like the best way to design a inside map. It's like Control Center and Lijiang Tower. Like I really like both those maps. I think it's incredibly strong for, again, you're running like a Ryan Zarya comp. Any sort of tank heavy, goats heavy is incredibly strong. Doomfist is incredible on this map. Probably his best stage in any map. Like it's incredible. Mei is incredible in this map. Yeah, it's
Mei's really good too.
There's always a wall you can punch someone into on this map. Almost everywhere you look.
Yeah.
But again, Mei is incredibly good here. And any hero that excels like that, I guess Reaper's good here as well. And it's one of those maps again where the second you get control of the point, you basically just win. If you play it correctly, you're holding the choke. Like them pushing into you in the choke is just it's just so hard to win from. So it's an incredibly snowballing map. It's incredibly good for like heavy tank comps and like Mei and Doomfist comps.
It does feel like the name of the game in this map is win the first fight, then block the chokes. Because there's 3 tiny little choke points. And if you're paying attention, it's easy to tell which way the bulk of the enemy team is coming. And it's easy to just block that choke, like you said, with either a tank heavy comp or a Mei. Even Doomfist is great for, just putting pressure on the chokes, because anyone who comes through there, you're just punching out of the way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, specifically, the middle choke where you go under is so risky, and it only works if the enemy team just doesn't expect it. So basically, you're left with 2 chokes. And like what honestly happens at high level is like they will fake going one way and then go the other way and like try and speed out. Specifically against Mei comps, it's really important to do this so the Mei doesn't get a good wall.
Right.
And I've seen teams like, fake go left and go right and go back to the left. It's like a whole mind game of like faking which way. This is one of those maps, again, once you get out the choke, it's anyone's game, The map is...
It's an all-out brawl.
It's not like it's favored, It's what wins you the fight is the fact that you fight them at the choke, and then it's so easy to get grabs. Like, you can just grab the wall and split them with the grab because they can't eat the grab through a wall. So you just grab the wall, splits them, you look for an earth shot, It's so snowbally, and it's so ridiculous.
And not only that, it's easy to get your ultimates when the team is coming through that choke point. It's so easy to spam him. Like, I'm not even a strong Zarya player, but it's the only map where I sometimes find myself getting like a grab back to back every fight in that map.
Yeah. It's crazy because, again, especially in the meta right now, because tanks are so strong. This is like the exact map that was designed for tank heavy comps and like death ball comps to be strong.
Right.
And like, the way it is right now, you play Zarya, the second you get control, you have full energy, you just throw a right click into the enemy team, you get like 50% of your grab. It's like it's ridiculous.
It is insane.
Yeah,
if you're high charge,
it's nuts.
Yeah, if you're high charge and you throw your right click, you hit like 3 people 2 times, and you're like at 70% charge. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There's something like interesting, kind of like as a side note that I wanted to bring up about this particular map is I feel like if you are doing any form of like strategic analysis, even at the highest level for like Overwatch League, this map could even be super, how would I say this? Like kind of deceptive when you have a very one-sided level of victory because of the fact of A, being able to pad statistics because of running into a choke like these. And B, like running into a game where you get 100-0 on Busan Mecha Base is like, well, that means they won the first fight and we just couldn't get it, like it's one of those things where I feel like if this map is in the pool for Overwatch Week, and I'm not sure it is, but it might be because I saw some teams scrimming on this.
I mean, it'll be at some point. I don't know if it'll be in stage 1.
Yeah. So anyways, like if this is one of the maps that's in those 3 things for a factor, I think that this is gonna be one of the ones where the community is really not gonna have the community is gonna have a hard time kind of evaluating how well teams are doing on this map because of that. Depending on how the meta shifts, of course. But
yeah, I mean, it's just one of those maps where it's hard to really take anything away. Like, I mean, a good example of a similar kind of situation was if you watch Team UK versus Team USA, the first stage on Ilios, Lighthouse, I think it was, we got 100-0'd. And like people were like, "Oh my god!" Like we got like I don't think we got a single kill.
No, you're gonna bring that game up now, Jesus.
Well, maybe.
All right, grab your popcorn, folks.
But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that we get like 100-0. We don't get a single kill the whole round. But if we get that point, I'm 100% sure we would have steamrolled them the whole round. It's just one of those maps where you win the first fight, you just win the game, and that's just like that's just how it is. You win the first fight, your win percentage is like 80%. You have to mess up real bad in order to let them capture the point. So it's
Yeah.
always going to look very strange. Like, oh great, my Zai got a 15 kill streak and was high charged the whole game. Or it's like, great, you won effectively one fight.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because like I think I remember reading a stat a while back about just all of the games in Control in general was like across the board. It was like a 65 or 60% win rate if you cap the point first in Control. And again, you have to realize that that's going to mean that there's a polarized stats in somewhere in Control maps where if it's like 80% or like 70% or something nuts win percentage on that first fight taken on certain Control maps, and then others it's a little bit more of an even split.
I mean,
this is skew.
This is like my problem I have with Control, and it kind of goes for 2CP as well, is that you winning the first fight, it means so much. Like, not only do you get the point, it means that you next fight you're going to take, you're going to be constantly gaining percentage while you're stalling, even if you lose. You have a huge ult advantage because you won the first fight, and it snowballs the whole game. So basically, you can't, if you win the first fight, you win the first fight. You basically can't lose the second fight because you have all advantage. The third fight, you're probably going to win anyway because you snowballed them so hard with your first set of ults. So that you're about like 80% into the round before they have a realistic fair fight. Same goes for 2CP. You win the first fight on 2CP, you win the first point, then you snowball with like 80%. Like all your teammates have like 80% ult, and you just like change the whole map. It's like it just feels like random. The variance just feels too high for me.
Yeah, the winning the first fight it is a huge point. Although let's just agree that it makes a huge difference, mostly when everyone in your team knows that is a factor, and then they're knowing how to act in accordance, right? Like winning the first fight in mecha base is super, super important, as long as your team knows that after that you have to move up the chokes, hold into the chokes, make it really hard for the enemy to retake. If you're not doing this, then mecha base is not that hard to retake, you know what I mean? And it's something to keep in mind when you're playing your ranked games, even at lower ranks. Be the vocal person in your team that's like, guys, we have the point, move up to the choke, hold on over here, make the call out yourself. They're going left side, they're trying to bait us into something, like move left side, make these call outs, because that is what makes the most difference sometimes, having your team act on what it's OP in the map.
Absolutely. And the problem with that is, again, like any map doesn't really get snowballed. It's about whether you play the map correctly, and it's important to know. Again, this just comes down to win conditions. If you know how to win, if you're playing on point with a tank comp on mecha base when you have control, like you're just playing wrong. You might have the better comp, you might have the better team, but you're just doing something wrong, and that makes the map like completely different. But again, my problem is that at the highest level of play, and like specifically like professional play, maps like that just feel like it's lost before. Like at the first fight, it's basically win. Like I'd love to see a statistic like of the end of Overwatch Season 2 of like what percentage of teams win the round after they win the first fight on mecha base, because it'll be like 70 to 80%. Like it's crazy snowballing.
Yeah, that is a crazy statistic, but I mean, you can argue that point from so many directions too, because then it's like, don't lose the first fight. Like that becomes like so important, right? Like, and if you're talking about Overwatch League, at that point it's of utmost priority of the team, the coaching, to be, why are we losing the first fight? We know that we lose the first fight, we have like an 80% chance of losing the rest of the map or something. I don't know, it becomes a whole nother game in my opinion.
But you see, the problem for me with that is then that kind of increases the variance. Like you could have a bad team that they win a round, they win the first fight. Maybe like the average team fight win rate is like 30%. They win that 30% then, and they just win the round off it. Like regardless of the fact they're the worst team, they have such a monumental advantage that it's ridiculous. So it increases the variance. It means that the better team doesn't win as much on a map like that. Whereas if you play a map like Kings Row, or you play a map like basically any player map like Dorado, you're always going to have 7, 8, 9 team fights per game, and you have to be winning like 70% of them. And the snowballing is there with ult, specifically with ult snowballing, but it's nowhere near as prevalent as it is on a map like Mecha Base.
Okay,
That's not something
I can
that
see your
the
point
total
there.
time of the match would affect. Do you think? Right? Because like the tick rate of getting the time going up with regards to control. Because let's try to stay on topic here, guys. But like with regards to control, the ticking of going from 0 to 100 is at a certain rate, right?
Mhm.
So if you increase that amount of time, not only is your game times going to extend by virtue of just having more time to do and capture points, plus having overtime factored in, the there's no neutralizing of ultimate economy or advantage of position once something has happened. That's kind of, I think, what you guys are really saying here. It's
Yeah.
not even so much that the map design is even an issue. It's more of once something has happened on the map, i.e. the point has been taken, then now you have a separate issue where it's like, okay, so what happens if the first players always take the map? How do we test that? Is this too? Do we just need to like widen the corridors? Do we need to give them another flank option? I mean, they did this with Anubis
Yeah,
in
they've done this in the past
super early
with certain
beta, right?
maps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
again,
yeah,
a lot of it I think comes down to what I would personally change at the game. I think ults build too fast, and this creates a kind of unhealthy level of snowballing. Like I feel like if you win the first fight even if you decisively win the first fight, if your team's like all 80% on ults, and like I feel like if
one fight.
you slowed the rate of ults down by like 50% or like 25% or whatever amount you want, it would create like a less snowbally game. And it also means that if you mess up an ultimate, it actually matters a lot more than it does now. Like even right now, you can just throw a grav, it gets eaten. The outcome's not that bad because you actually get to build your grav faster because you can build your ult immediately instead of having to wait for the grav to expire. So like you can throw your grav away and get 60% on another grav. And I think that is one of the problems with the game. I think ults just build too fast, specifically
Yeah.
support ults as well.
Yeah, some also build pretty fast. Let's talk about that then in Mecha Base, because that is a big problem. Once you lose the first fight, you're holding at the chokes. The enemy team probably has an ult advantage. Um, what are some ways that maybe you can combat that? Because like one of the heroes that I can think of when you're behind in Mecha Base is Sombra, for example. Is one of the heroes that can sneak past the choke without being undetected. You can let your team go through one side, take the other side, and if you can build your EMP fast enough, hopefully, you can buy a window of opportunity for your team to get through that choke. Be like, guys, I got EMP. Boom, EMP here. They can't grab, they can't shatter, they can't do any pins, doomfist spins or anything. You have like this window where you can go through. What do you think of using heroes like that? Because I mean, you've won Mecha Base when you're behind before.
I mean, absolutely. But again, this comes down to the issue of if you play a hero like Sombra, like, your win condition when you're playing Sombra on a map like that is EMP, and it's effectively only EMP. You don't get any value outside of EMP on a map like that. So it comes down to how fast can you build your EMP. And if you're behind, you're looking at building your EMP like when the points are like 60-70%. So often it's better to just stay in the mirror, and you just run in and like almost like dry fight, like almost like suicide into their ults. Like they have grav, we have no defensive odds. We're just gonna walk in, get grabbed, die fast, and that's the starts to become the effective way to play the game. Here, like Sombra is good in theory, but kind of takes a bit too long to ramp up on a map like that. Even if you build your EMP really fast, I mean, EMP at that on that map should realistically be a team fight win. You don't really need anything else. And if you have an Earth Shatter, which is an incredibly fast building ult, and it's probably the best ult in the game in Goat's meta, then you obviously just wipe them because it's impossible to miss a shadow when they're all EMP'd.
Right. So you would
bringing
still
up the
favor
factor of. Oh, go ahead, Andres.
I was just gonna say you still favor running like a goats heavy comp, and instead most of like trying to brute force ult economy into your favor, trying to like make him lose their ults or trade ults a little bit ineffectively, and hopefully at one point you'll have your ults to retake, rather than maybe going a more mobile comp like Sombra or like Tracer come to mind, a hero that can get past the choke and go to the point and kind of like force somebody from the enemy team to be like, well, we gotta abandon choke to contest.
Well, you see, the reason I say this is generally because, specifically on mecha base, if you win one fight, yeah, it's relatively easy to just follow the map. So if you just save your ults, like even if you give them 99%, as long as you win the fight, you can come back from 99 to 0 relatively easy because holding the choke is so effective. That's why
Mm-hmm.
the key is winning important fights. If you lose 3 fights in your own mecha base, then you win one fight, then it's not out of the question for you to full hold them at the choke exactly the way they did to you.
Right.
So that's the reason I do prefer that. I think specifically if you run against goats on a map like that, there's no real way to beat it unless you run a goats mirror, unless you win the first fight, which is again a different story. But it's almost impossible to reach it with any other
No,
comp.
that's good. That's good. That's good. I like the whole reasoning. Yeah, you're basically trying to do the same to them. Like hopefully you can flip the point and then just do the same, hold them at the choke. And if you're not
Yeah.
playing a tank heavy comp, holding it at the choke is probably gonna be harder to do than with a Winston Diva or something.
I mean, it's the same principle as when you're in a payload map and the enemy and you're defending on the payload map. The enemy team's on overtime. You only got to win one fight, and like let's say you've pushed the point however much, then they just got to mirror that, like match that and go further. If you just like bank all your ults and just take one fight and you just win that fight guaranteed, it doesn't matter the fact you lost 3 fights in a row before. The one fight is all you need, and it's like that, like not to the same degree because you don't instantly win the game.
Right.
But
You
it's the
still have to
same
hold
kind of
them.
principle. Like by far the most important thing on that map is having control, having positioning on them is so unbelievably important that it's worth sacrificing, ult economy and like them having like 99% of the point in order to get that positioning.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Okay. Another thing to kind of discuss about what you were talking about, Chip says, I wonder how metas potentially could be affected by simply evaluating heroes off of having their ultimates less. Like you were saying, Sombra gets significantly weaker in situations where like for example in Numbani, and you have like you're in round, like you did a full cap of 3 points, your opponents did a full cap of 3 points, and you just need to take 1 tick and you win. And so what do? You sit there, you play bot Sombra until you get your ult, you EMP, you win the fight, the game's over.
Mm-hmm.
But in scenarios where the ultimate economy takes a lot longer for you to get even one ult, and then if the ult is botched or doesn't get a whole lot of value or gets 0 value, it means more in the negative way as well as it means in the positive way because you have it. How do you think in again, we're just theory crafting here, but like what is something that you can kind of see kind of coming out of this? Because potentially, as we've seen with goats, the strength of goats is that A, you can build ults really quickly with a comp, and B, it's really good without them. Like to be able to just continually stay in fights and stay super durable and mobile.
I mean, especially the current iteration of Zen goats is like a lot based on like you will actually lose to a lot of comps without ults, but the strength of the comp is like your support ults in particular just build so ridiculously fast. You keep your Harmony up on Reinhardt, he's just like swinging, taking damage. It builds. You can build a Zeno in like 45 seconds. Like, it's crazy, and I think that is problematic. Support ults are so strong, and tank ults are also incredibly strong in the right hands. Like supports are really good and they're relatively easy to use. Tank ults are incredibly strong and relatively difficult to use. And I think that support ults build too fast. They have too much impact. And overall, I think I'd nerf support ults more than anything. Specifically, Zen ult builds too fast and it has no counters besides anti-nade. Like even a Sombra EMPing the Zen, if the Zen is on point, you can actually just pre-trans the EMP, sorry. And that's relatively common in Hyla. And like Sombra in theory would counter all of these things, but if you just play correctly, like you just play your Lucio around the corner and so he doesn't get EMP. The second your entire team gets EMP, you run around with beat, It's relatively easy. And the strength of support ults, along with the strength of like tank ults, I think is what makes the comp so strong. Like you pull a Genji blade into that comp, great. You're not going to kill anything, If they don't have trans, they probably have beat. If they don't have trans or beat, they probably will have brig armor. If not, you can get solo grabbed. If you can get solo grabbed. It's almost impossible to miss a solo grab on a nano Genji, Just throw it at the feet of your Zen. Great.
That's happened to me before. It feels horrible.
Can't do it. Same with Shad. You get Shad, you're screwed, So like I would say 5 out of the 6 ults in goats hard counter like any DPS ult in the game. So either like DPS ults just needs to be buffed, which I don't think is healthy. I think DPS ults are in a good spot, or you just nerf the
That's
support
fair.
ults.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting problem, I think, because, like you're saying, at the top level, this is how you're experiencing ults, right? Like at the top level, there's Sens who do get their ult in 45 seconds. There's Sombras who get their EMP in 30 seconds. There's Saryas who get a grab every fight. You know what I mean? But at lower ranks, a Zen takes sometimes 2 minutes to get a transcendence. Sometimes he can go an entire whole control point and not get the transcendence.
Sounds more like my Zaryas in ranked.
Yeah, so it's an interesting problem to look at because on one hand, you want to balance it for the top level, right? The top level is what you're trying to cultivate in Overwatch League, is what you're trying to cultivate in, the ladder. But then as you trickle down, like these numbers start getting like way larger and larger, right? Like if you force a Zen to get a transcendence instead in 45 seconds, maybe a minute and 30 seconds, what does that mean for the player in gold? Will they go entire games without getting an ultimate? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean,
And
this just comes
There's an
down to the
interesting
philosophy of the
ripple
balance.
effect.
Yeah, it just comes down to the philosophy of the balance of like, it's so hard to balance around high elo and low elo at the same time,
right.
And me myself, I generally only care about like professional play and like high level solo queue. So because I was in the mentality that like people at lower elos don't really know what's good themselves, so it's impossible for them to like they might craft their own meta, but their meta is not even good. So like they don't know what's best for them themselves. They might think that this change should be good for them, but oftentimes it won't be. I mean, there's obviously exceptions, but like here's like Junkrat. I think getting nerfed is fine, even though Junkrat was never really played at high level. You could nerf the hero and it's fine because if as long as it like helps the casual player base, I'm not really against it because I don't you don't want to alienate the casual player base entirely, or else the game
Well,
doesn't
it's
exist
a,
as is.
it's a balancing act. It's like having herbivores and carnivores. You know what I mean? You need both in the ecosystem because you can't have a ranked ladder with if there's no people at the lower ranks, right? Like not everyone's going to be a pro player, and you need like that system, right? That raises the talent, and if you're not performing, it brings you down a little bit. And the game itself needs both, right? Because even if you have your hardcore player base and they're satisfied, if everyone else just doesn't enjoy the game because it feels bad for them, then you have no game in the first place. I don't know. It's a big problem.
Another thing is that the vast majority of the revenue that Blizzard will make from Overwatch will be from your average gold, platinum, like maybe not even a ranked player. They're going to be. I think they're going to spend maybe not per person, but as like a percentage, like 80% of the revenue will come from players like that. And it's
Right.
important. You can't just like piss them off, or else it's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. And obviously, we're just kind of like speaking for ourselves over here. We don't really know what goes on in over there, but I think it's a big problem. And it's just interesting hearing your perspective in regards with some of the ultimates. Have you perceived those at the higher ranks? Obviously, I can only speak from my experience at around Diamond, my low masters at the most. And I know Rob, you experienced the game in your own way too. You just reached Diamond 2.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, I actually almost broke through 3200 this week for the first time, so I've been pretty hyped about that. I've been playing lots of Ana and Ash and Hanzo. I took a lot of tips from when we had Faria on and Andres talking about it week to week, pretty much every week. He's been helping me out with my Ash play, and then I have about 3 different players helping me with Pharah and Genji, which I have some of the lowest hours of any hero on Genji, and I'm learning combos and stuff. I mean, not to toot ChipSa's horn even more, but I've been watching some of ChipSa's videos on his YouTube page with regards to when he's switching and why he's switching from Doomfist to Genji, and I've been finding some of those decision-making processes, albeit quick and in short spurts, helpful. But anyways, I joined a couple teams to start working on my goats play, and I forgot how much I actually enjoyed playing Brigitte. I think every time I've run into Volskaya games, I've gotten to point B and knocked off a Reinhardt on point B walking back from spawn while we're capping point on offense.
Oh,
And it's
nice.
so satisfying to just beat the crap out of a full health Reinhardt when they're walking out of spawn and they don't see you.
I
It's
just
just
thought it was funny, ChipSa's face when you said that you've been enjoying playing Brigitte again.
well, it's because I have avoided playing her so much because there's just so many people that are like, oh, Brigitte's, everyone's gonna play goats, blah 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 blah, and I'm just like, I don't have to play goats to climb. I can play what I want. This is diamond. Like,
Listen,
this
hey,
is diamond and platinum. I can do
Brigitte
whatever I want.
gets a lot of flack sometimes, because
Yeah.
she steps on what some people love playing in the game. But if you
Yeah.
enjoy Brigitte, you do that, man. You do your thing.
I mean, I enjoy a lot of heroes in Overwatch, but I didn't normally play a whole lot of Brigitte to climb. I know how to play her well because, frankly, I think she's fairly easy to play, and I play her like Omega aggro when I have super aggro tanks with me, and it helps a lot. But when I don't, when I have super passive tanks, I'm just like, I can't play this hero anymore. So, that's just one thing that I've learned. But getting back to what we were talking about with different elos, I've had probably the most diverse experience. I think I've played in every rank at least for 10 games, I'd say, at the minimum. But I probably spent the most time playing gold and platinum games at large. So that being said, I do think that there's a lot of value to what Chips is saying, regardless if that's for an upper echelon of balance. Because I think at the base, players want something where at large the casual or semi-hardcore, I guess, is probably the main player base. The people that are playing 1 or 2 days a week, getting home on the weekends, or kids playing like 1 to 2 hours before or after homework time. That's kind of, even in college, right? Those are the kind of kids and adults that are playing the game semi-casually, semi-hardcore, and playing game nights with friends that are going to be in those ranks because they're just not able to dedicate a whole lot of time to learning the game, executing, practicing, getting with teams, scrimming, that type of a schedule regimen that they just don't have access to and or the ability to do. And so with that kind of a thing and an approach coming in, I think those players, being one of them myself, I just want bigger changes. I just want something different. And it's not just that I want something different in Overwatch. It's one of those intangible things from the balance team that I think a lot of players don't really have the ability to articulate, which is they want something big that changes. But they don't really know what that means. And the Blizzard team could make something that's super freaking big. And then the players play and the perception of that change is not met by something that is actualized. Or the pro player base is saying that, Blizzard, you think this is big and it's not. And so because they're the pros and that's what people listen to, it just has that trickle down effect. So I think that there's a lot of different factors at place, but I think that the ultimate like Omega nerf going down, and people were freaking the heck out this week on armor. Let's be honest. Like, people were losing their ever living minds over this and Reaper. And they thought that this change was super dynamic. And Andres and I'd spent like an hour last week, and even just in Discord over the course of this last 2 weeks, we're just like, this isn't really that big of a change for Reaper, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
it's not huge. It is a huge change that they did in writing, and actually, like in lower ranks, I can see the effects of this, like being borderline oppressive at certain ranks, right? But to be honest, it's like that definitely affects a large chunk of the player base. But to me, it's like, I'm not going to choose this hero any more or less unless like I really need a brawler that just rip tanks in half. And even then, it's like I'll just play Mei, have more utility. So anyways, that's kind of a monologue. I apologize for that, but I think that at the end of the discussion, players would just be happy with more regular large scale changes, which is weird because I know that when they did this, people were upset because there wasn't more frequent changes that were smaller scale. So it's like a he said she said situation where it's like, well, are we going to ask for smaller changes and have like these slow iterations over time, or do we want big monumental shifts in meta? or big monumental shifts in big things, because big shifts mean that there's more seasonal hype around items, similar to like going to Taco Bell for freaking a different taco, like whatever it is, it's going to be different, but you're only going to get it once a year. It's going to be huge. Um, and I just compared Overwatch to tacos, so you know that I'm ready for bed. So
Yeah, it's a little detour from our mecha-based conversation.
yeah.
But yeah, that was an interesting conversation. Getting to hear your opinion about ultimates and how the game is played at
Mhm.
the top level. I think we can always learn something from that, and it's good having players like you opening up and letting everyone know, hey, this is how I'm playing the game. This is how I'm perceiving it. This is the things that maybe I could see being changed in the future. And then again, super awesome input on how to play the map. I think that for anyone trying to get a primer on how to get into Busan, these are some really good pointers to look into. Every map, I think that ChipSa gave you a good point of like, this is what at the top level is being abused and what is really good. And hopefully give you an idea of what you should look or think about when you're playing these maps and what you should look to improve to maybe be a little better in these maps.
So, Chipsa, you have the floor. Any other thoughts on overall stuff here? We've covered a lot of bases today, and then just plug your stuff.
Yeah, I think we had a good conversation about stuff. There's a few changes I'd like to make to the game. I think the ultimate change, I don't know if it's practical. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it tried. I'd like to see PTR used more for experimenting as opposed to here's some patch notes. We're never going to change them. But yeah, I mean, it's been great being here as well. You can catch me live pretty much every day, twitch.tv/ChipSa, youtube.com/ChipSa, and twitter.com/ChipSa_OW. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been always a pleasure to have you on, Chipsa. I'm glad that we can make it happen. I know that we had to dodge you moving apartments and basically
Yeah.
doing construction and stuff, so I'm glad it worked out. Um, let's thank a few folks at home before we let you know where you can find the show. First and foremost, we have our sponsorships for Diamond patrons, top level people supporting us over at patreon.com/Omnic Lab. We have Top Score Solutions, Anthony E. PS4 or solo on PS4, Jan Jinkle, Durandal, Roger B, Britness, Shazir, Krista Player, Tragic Zach, Lissum, Connell M, and Matthew Z, along with the brand new patrons this week, Ruben R, Daniel P, and joining the Diamond team, we have Brendan D. Thank you guys so much for joining on the new team, as well as the returning oldies on our Diamond squad. Been talking with some folks about potential ads that they might be running on the show for some positions in their field, as well as another podcast that may be returning for another sponsorship, which is super exciting. If you guys are interested in those things, you can always ask them in our Discord. They're always there. And if you want to support us for just like a cup of coffee, every episode we make or something like that, you can go to patreon.com, check out the perks there. We do VOD reviews for platinum level, and there's a stream alert thing system for diamond. So some cool stuff there in the Discord. That being said, Andres, would you like to run through the names on our iTunes reviews real quick for some other people to thank?
Absolutely. We want to thank Shark Steph from the USA, also Plum Z and Oatmeal. Thank you so much for leaving us a review. I'll read one out really quick. I got into podcasts and I always wanted to find one for my favorite game, Overwatch. I listened to a few, but once I found Omnic Lab, I never had any doubt in my mind that this is what I've been looking for. An Overwatch podcast for the ladder climber looking to improve and learn strategies for comps and heroes. Rob and Andres are knowledgeable, passionate, and engaged with our community, great at talking and keeping up conversation going. Sometimes for a little too long. Yeah, sometimes we like to conversate. But thank you so much for the iTunes review. We really appreciate it. And we're glad that you're finding something to improve on from our podcast.
Yeah, really appreciate it. If you guys want to support us like others have, we have Shazir actually jumping in the chat this week and giving us 500 bits. So special thanks for you to do that while we're recording. Really appreciate that. If you want to jump on that hype train, you can go to twitch.com. We have Twitch affiliate and or twitch.tv/Omnic Lab. You can check us out there. You can also check out ChipSa again. Please go watch his streams, especially for our EU crowd. It's much more friendly for your time zone to go check it out on the GMT. And when he's streaming there, you can check all of his info there in the description. If you want to join our community, you can see when people are streaming in the sidebar. You can head over to discord.me/OmnicLab and join the community, as well as talking with people from Owl Recap, our sister show. Anything else that you want to find, you can find Andres at I Play Games. That's IPLAI Games on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at the tag not Rob. And that's gonna do it for the show, guys. Don't be a lab rat. Be a scientist. We'll see you next week. And get your Doomfists out, because got a new patch, right?
Yes.
All right, we got a really cool episode for you next week. We got Switch from Omnic Meta, CS, who's a top 500 PS4 player. We're doing a revisited 2.0 console super show. We'll see you there next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks to everyone in the chat.
I got a new mouse this week.
Love that fuzzy ice cube. Actually has a fuzzy ice cube as an icon.
This mouse is incredible.
G Pro Wireless.
Love it. Yeah.
Was it the G? Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I just
Damn,
got one
you
recently,
guys
so-
are matching over here. I feel left out.
I have nothing more to teach you.
80 grams, Andres.
You must learn for yourself.
Wireless mouse, 80 grams. Lithium-ion batteries. Man,
Walk
crazy.
in